Today we're diving into You Are Not So Smart by David McRaney. Have you ever felt like you see the same story repeated over and over, whether on TV, in the news, or on social media? Do you and a friend sometimes recall the same event in entirely different ways? This book reveals the fascinating quirks of our minds, showing how we can misunderstand even our own thoughts, often without realizing it. Consider this. Two presidents were assassinated on a Friday. Two major ships collided with ice and sank in the same month. And people in dangerous situations sometimes carry on with work as if nothing is wrong. These might sound like coincidences or just curious details, but they're actually signs of how our brains tend to fool us. It's strange, yet compelling, and it's something we all experience. In this summary, you'll discover how the mind can play tricks on us and why we aren't as rational or logical as we like to think. McRaney explains how our brains interpret the world in unique ways, often leading us to conclusions that aren't necessarily accurate. Through intriguing stories and insights, you'll uncover the common psychological biases and mental shortcuts that shape our thoughts and decisions, often without us realizing it. Stay with us till the end to explore how our minds work and to understand why, despite all our intelligence, we might not be as smart as we assume. Let's begin. The Texas sharpshooter fallacy. The United States has witnessed the tragic assassinations of two presidents, Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. Both were shot, each a century apart, and their assassins shared curious similarities. Both had three names containing a total of 15 letters: John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald. The parallels continue. Both presidents were killed on a Friday while seated next to their wives. Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater, while Kennedy was in a Lincoln car made by Ford. Following their deaths, both were succeeded by vice presidents with the surname Johnson: Andrew Johnson, born in 1808, and Lyndon Johnson, born precisely 100 years later in 1908. The connections feel uncanny, even eerie, don't they? And these strange patterns don't end here. In 1898, a novel titled Futility, written by Morgan Robertson, described a ship named Titan, a luxurious liner resembling a grand hotel on water. This fictional ship's fate bears striking similarities to the Titanic, which sank 14 years later. In Futility, the Titan strikes an iceberg in April, about 400 miles off Newfoundland, the same month and approximate location where the Titanic would later meet its end. In both the book and real life, the ships collided with an iceberg near midnight, resulting in massive loss of life. Both had a passenger capacity of 3,000, and in both tragedies, more than half the passengers perished. Hearing this, do you feel a chill down your spine? It's haunting, isn't it? This phenomenon is known as the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Essentially, it's when our minds connect random events, giving them meaning, and creating a pattern where none truly exists. Imagine a cowboy practicing shooting in his field. He fires randomly at a wall, then paints a bullseye around the spots with the highest concentration of bullet holes. Now, to anyone passing by, it looks as though he's a sharpshooter who hit the target every time. This is the essence of the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. When we believe in a certain pattern or idea, we unconsciously ignore any information that contradicts it. We focus on the details that support our beliefs and overlook those that don't fit. Take the Titanic story, for instance. In Futility, only 13 people survive, and some face perilous adventures afterward, including one character who battles a polar bear before being rescued. And while the Lincoln-Kennedy coincidences are striking, there are plenty of dissimilarities. Lincoln was a Baptist, Kennedy a Catholic. Lincoln was shot with a pistol, Kennedy with a rifle. One was killed in Washington, the other in Texas. As humans, we have an innate drive to find meaning, to connect dots in the vast, complex world around us. This desire to make sense of things helped our ancestors adapt and survive. Carl Sagan, the famous astronomer, once said, "In the vastness of space and the immensity of time, it is my joy to share a planet and an epic with my wife." It's a reminder that while the universe may be indifferent, we get to choose what holds meaning in our lives. The choice to find purpose amid the noise is entirely up to us. Normalcy bias. Imagine you're in a Boeing 747 descending toward the runway when suddenly the engine begins to fail. At first, you think back on what a smooth journey it's been, until you look out the window, trying to see something through the dense fog. Then, without warning, a deafening explosion shakes your body, echoing like two trains colliding. Smoke fills the plane, and flames begin to engulf parts of it. Through the chaos, you see a hole in the side of the plane, a possible way out. You would think that, in such a dire situation, you'd instantly react and make a run for it. But studies have shown that, in emergencies, many people freeze, acting as if nothing is wrong. Emergency responders, firefighters, meteorologists, and psychologists refer to this as normalcy bias. It's a psychological state in which people underestimate the seriousness of a crisis and continue behaving as if everything is normal. A real-life example of this bias was the 1977 Tenerife airport disaster. On this foggy day, two Boeing 747s collided on the runway. The thick fog obscured visibility, and miscommunication between the air traffic controller and the pilots added to the chaos. As a result, the KLM aircraft, which was attempting to take off, collided with the landing Pan Am flight at a devastating speed of 160 miles per hour. Rescue teams rushed toward the KLM flight, engulfed in flames, while Pan Am's engines were still running with damaged wiring, preventing them from being shut down. Many passengers remained strapped to their seats, paralyzed by shock and unable to react quickly. Those who did manage to unbuckle, jump down from the plane's height, and move toward safety survived. Sadly, minutes later, the Pan Am central fuel tank exploded, killing everyone who remained inside. So, what separates those who act from those who freeze in such situations? The answer lies in preparation. Studies reveal that people who have previously experienced or practiced responding to emergencies, such as surviving fires, earthquakes, or natural disasters, are more likely to react quickly in life-threatening situations. Their prior experiences help them bypass the brain stages of shock and confusion, allowing them to take action without hesitation. In a crisis, your brain moves through different stages, assessing danger, making decisions, and then acting. But these stages can only be completed if you're prepared. If you've experienced something similar before, your brain doesn't need to go through these steps again, enabling you to react faster. Preparation is key. Those who have trained their minds and bodies to handle emergencies stand a better chance of survival when faced with unexpected disasters. Confirmation bias. Imagine you're on a coffee break with your colleagues, chatting about an old movie like The Golden Child, and laughing over the actors who have since faded from the screen. After the break, you go back to work, the conversation quickly forgotten, until that evening. While flipping through channels, you stumble across that very movie playing on TV. It feels uncanny. The next day, as you read the newspaper, an article on 1980s films catches your eye, and there it is again. Another mention of the same movie. Later, A friend sends you a magazine link featuring a picture of one of the movie's actresses. By now, you're starting to wonder if the universe is sending you a message. Are these coincidences, or is something else at play? This phenomenon is called confirmation bias, a common concept in psychology. In reality, you've probably encountered plenty of other news, articles, and social media posts in that same period. However, your brain chose to ignore all the unrelated information and focused only on those bits connected to that specific movie. Consider another example. Let's say you're thinking about buying a new car, and suddenly you start seeing that exact model everywhere. Or imagine you've just gone through a breakup, and now every song seems to echo your love story. If you're expecting a child, you might start noticing babies and families wherever you go. Confirmation bias means viewing the world through a filter. We naturally gravitate toward information that reinforces our beliefs and opinions, often ignoring any facts that challenge them. It's an unconscious tendency to seek out things that confirm what we already think. Journalist Valdez Krebs explored this during the 2008 U.S. presidential election by analyzing book-buying trends on Amazon. He found that people who supported Obama bought books that painted him as an honest, responsible leader. Conversely, those who opposed him chose books depicting him as deceitful. Think about it. Without confirmation bias, conspiracy theories would have little traction. Take, for example, the moon landing. If you believe humans landed on the moon, there's ample information online that supports this view. But if you're skeptical, you'll find plenty of articles backing your doubts as well. Our brains, it turns out, work in the same way. We selectively absorb information that confirms our existing beliefs, often disregarding the rest. Hindsight bias. I knew that was going to happen. I had a feeling it would turn out this way. I just knew you'd say that. Have you ever found yourself saying these things? That's hindsight bias at play, the tendency to reshape our memories so that what happened feels as if we always knew it would. In hindsight bias, we connect our thoughts to reality, editing our memory to make events seem predictable in retrospect. A recent study from Harvard suggests that as people age, they often hold on to their earlier beliefs, resisting new ideas. They may find it difficult to accept perspectives that contradict what they already know, especially on topics they feel knowledgeable about. So, does that mean you can't teach an old dog new tricks? On the flip side, another study from the University of Alberta suggests that older adults can actually complete a 4-year degree faster than 18-year-olds, whose brains are still developing. With years of accumulated knowledge, these older adults may excel in learning, proving that there's no age limit to acquiring new skills. Now, you might think these findings sound familiar, even obvious. But here's the twist. Neither study is real. Both statements were fabricated, yet you may have believed them because they seem to come from valid research. This is the power of hindsight bias. You likely formed an opinion about each claim because it seemed credible when presented as a study. Here's another example. After the 9/11 attacks, people were asked if they thought another attack was likely. Many said no, and later, as time passed without another attack, these same people felt that they had always believed it wouldn't happen. Even those who initially answered yes found themselves thinking they'd actually said no. Let's look at a real study by Carl Tegan at the University of Oslo. He asked participants if they believed in the saying, "Love is stronger than fear." Most agreed. Later, he presented the opposite phrase, "Fear is stronger than love," and again, most participants agreed. So, which one is true? This demonstrates how hindsight bias works. convincing us that common sense is obvious when, in fact, it may not be. Hindsight bias helps our minds create clarity in a complex, unpredictable world, a trait that evolved from our ancestors. With so much happening in our brains, making decisions can be challenging. Hindsight bias clears out information that doesn't align with our beliefs, allowing us to focus on what feels right and relevant. Confabulation. Imagine a dating game where you and your partner are asked about the details of your relationship, your first date, what you ate, how you met. Each of you is asked to write down your answers on separate boards. Do you think your responses will match? Likely not. Our memories aren't as accurate as we believe, and when there are gaps, our brains fill them in with details or stories we think are true. Here's another example. Let's say you went on a vacation with friends or family. You probably remember the events differently than they do. Who won the games? Who shared which story? This is a tendency called confabulation, where our brains create details to complete memories, even if they're not entirely accurate. In a way, our lives are like a history book or a biographical film. When a movie says it's based on true events, we don't expect every line or every scene to be completely accurate. Some elements are altered for a good storyline. Similarly, in our minds, the specifics may not be as crucial as the main story itself: who we are, where we're headed, and why we're here. Our brains are divided into two halves, the left and right hemispheres, connected by a bundle of nerves called the corpus callosum, which acts like a communication highway between the two. In severe cases of epilepsy, doctors sometimes perform a procedure called a corpus callosotomy, severing this connection to prevent seizures when other treatments fail. Patients who undergo this procedure are called split brain patients, and fascinating research has been conducted on them, helping scientists understand how our brain operates. Each hemisphere has its own specialized tasks. For example, language processing happens primarily in the left hemisphere, while images and spatial awareness are handled by the right. Normally, these tasks are communicated across hemispheres via the corpus callosum. But with split brain patients, this connection is severed. In one experiment by psychologists at the University of California, split brain patients were asked to look at a screen showing a cross in the center, with the word truck appearing on the left side. For people with a typical brain, seeing and naming the word truck is easy. However, split brain patients, when asked to say what they saw, replied that they didn't know. Surprisingly, when asked to draw with their left hand, they sketched a truck. Here's the trick. The left eye sends images to the right brain and the right eye to the left brain. Because language processing is in the left brain and image processing in the right, split brain patients couldn't say the word truck but could draw it. In another study, split brain patients were shown the word bell on the left and music on the right. When asked to choose from images of a bell, drum, trumpet, and organ, they chose the bell. This is where confabulation comes in. Because of the split brain condition, they couldn't explain why they chose the bell, so they created their own reason. One participant said they picked it because they remembered hearing bells from a college tower. In yet another study, split brain patients were shown the word walk. They stood up and began to walk. When researchers asked why, they responded, "I felt like getting a drink," instead of acknowledging they didn't know the reason. Even with a fully functioning brain, we all confabulate. We continuously provide reasons for our actions and find explanations for things happening in our lives. These narratives help us define who we are and our place in the world. In essence, We are the storytellers of our own lives. Just like a hero in a movie, we construct meaning and purpose for our actions. Without confabulation, our identity and sense of self would feel incomplete. Conclusion. First, you learned about the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, where our brain tries to find meaning in coincidences. We focus only on the similarities in events and ignore the differences, shaping patterns where none truly exist. Second, we explored normalcy bias. In emergencies, most people freeze rather than taking action to save themselves. The difference between those who survived and those who didn't lies in preparation. Those who made it out had trained their brains to recognize danger and react swiftly. Third, we discussed confirmation bias. We tend to seek proof that supports our beliefs, filtering out any information that contradicts our views. In other words, we see the world through the lens of our existing opinions. Fourth, hindsight bias shows how we edit our memories to fit what we now believe. We often say, "I knew it all along," or "I had a feeling this would happen," even if our initial thoughts were different. Fifth, confabulation reveals how our minds fill in memory gaps with fabricated details. Split brain patients, for instance, create stories to explain how they process information. But even those with typical brains are constantly confabulating, finding reasons for their actions, and crafting narratives about their preferences and life events. These concepts are fascinating, aren't they? Our brain uses these and many other tricks to help us navigate and function effectively every day. In this vast universe full of mysteries and things beyond our control, what truly matters is making the most of the time we have and ensuring that we live a meaningful life. Thank you for listening to this journey into the mind's surprising tricks and biases. From spotting patterns to filling memory gaps, we've seen how our brains shape our thoughts without us even realizing it. If you found this interesting, check out other summaries on our channel to learn even more about how we think and live. Remember, understanding yourself is powerful. Keep exploring, keep learning, and use these ideas to make each day more meaningful.